All right, so as we can see, the analog synth engines are very flexible, very capable, and will allow us to create a lot of unique content. What I like to do now is import a bunch of samples that I have on my computer, so then that way I can either use the analog synth engines, use the samples, or combine them to get even more adventurous with my material. Now, when it comes to utilizing samples with rhythm, I think it's important to realize that we're not limited to just using one-shot drum samples. The more different sample types we bring in will give us that many more directions to go in and that many more creative possibilities. For example, instead of bringing in a one-shot drum sample, I could bring in a full drum loop. And then that way, when I go to the sample page, I could parameter lock the start and end points and essentially kind of chop up the drum break as it plays through the pattern. I could bring in a vocal a cappella and do the same sort of thing, or reverse it by making the start point occur after the end point. I could bring in different types of sounds that are not specifically drum sounds. For example, I like to use a lot of gunshots and war sounds and, banging on pots and just hitting different things that have been recorded and utilize those so that the drums sound that much more unique. So with all that said, I have a folder on my computer that's full of other folders of other content, and I just want to bring some of this stuff into Rhythm. Now, as you may or may not know, by now you probably should know, Rhythm is not a sampler. There's no way for us to actually record samples directly into Rhythm. We have to transfer them. And when we do transfer them, we're going to do that via sysx. Elektron provides a tool called the C6 sysx tool. I've been practicing saying that. And we can utilize this to send samples to our analog Rhythm. Now, my goal here is not to include samples that I'm going to use in this particular project. What I want to do is import some samples that will be on the plus drive on the internal storage of Rhythm and create a new project and then pull just a handful of these samples into whatever pattern or song that I begin to create. But the idea is that I can bring a bunch of stuff, import a bunch of stuff at once, and then I don't necessarily need to connect Rhythm to the computer again until I kind of run out of ideas for the samples that I've imported. So that's what I'm going for. All right, now with that said, I have a USB cable connected to Rhythm, and I have the C6 sysx tool by Elektron open on my computer. Before I do anything, I want to go back into the global menu on Rhythm. So I'm going to hold Function and press Global. And I want to go into the samples folder here. So I'm going to press Yes. And we see here that there are 3 folders. Initially, you might only see 2 if this is your first time doing this. We have the factory folder, and next to it says D. That's a directory, which means that it's a folder. So we can press Yes here. So in here, we have a bunch of different sample types that we can choose from, which is very helpful. But I'm going to back out of this. I want to go back up a level to the previous folder. So at the top, we have 2 dots with the D. This is going to bring us to the previous folder. And I've actually already created a folder here called Thav Samples, and I want to import my samples into this particular folder. Now, how did I create this directory? If you notice, there's a line on this side with a little arrow and a line on this side with an arrow, and that just indicates that there's certain options we'll see if we press the appropriate arrow to unveil what's on those sides. If I press the left arrow here, it just says View RAM. So this way I can view samples not that are just on the plus drive, but things that have been loaded into RAM and are available in the current project. If I press the right arrow, I can select directories, rename them, delete them, or create one. So if you want to create your own folder so that you can import your samples into there, or create multiple folders so that your samples are organized, that's how you do it. Just create a directory. Now I've already done that. So I'm going to hit Yes to go into my Thav Samples directory. And now what? Well, we still have those 2 lines there with the arrow. And if I hit the left arrow while I'm inside of this particular folder, I have the option to upload samples here. So I'm going to select that option. And now any samples that I send are going to be stored in my Thav's sample folder. So now let me turn my attention to the computer. With the C6 sysx tool, I need to make sure that, for one, this can see analog rhythm and that it's set up to send data to it. So let me go to the config area here. And I'm sending things out, so I want to make sure the MIDI out here is set up to send to Rhythm. That's cool. Over here where it says sample settings, I want to make sure that SDS handshake and use extended SDS are both ticked. I especially want to make sure that this one is ticked so that when I'm sending samples, the full name of the sample, or at least as much can fit on the display, will show up. Otherwise, they'll just be randomly numbered, and that's not going to be very helpful. So let me hit OK. And like like I said, I want to load samples of various types, and I have a bunch of different kits here, but I'm going to start with some royalty-free stuff because that's the safest. So let me go into this little drum and bass folder here, and Loopmasters always has some helpful content. Let me see, let's go into the broken beats. And I'm not going to preview all this stuff. I'm just going to drop some things in here randomly because I know I'll be able to get some use out of quite a lot of it. I'll just drop a few of these in here. We go back. I had another folder full of movie samples. Here we go. Some interesting, bizarre stuff. And I'm going to take all of these because these are relatively small and drop them in here. And let me see. I have a folder with some longer drum breaks in it. If I go back out here, I believe, let's see, go down to the bottom, and here we go. And I'm just going to grab just a couple of these. Now, again, I don't want to drop too much stuff at once because the more things you're sending, the longer the data transfer is going to take. Again, we're not using USB 3, we're using sysx, and it can take kind of a while. Now, I'm not going to make you guys sit here for the whole entire transfer process, but I do want to make one thing clear. If we just have one sample selected in our sysx tool, when we hit the send button, it's just going to send that one sample. Oh, and actually, you know what? I just realized this is an MP3, and MP3s are not going to work here. So let me go ahead and those are at the bottom. All right, I'll disregard those. Let's say I want to send this particular broken beat sample, and just this one. If I hit send, we can see now Analog RYTM is receiving that particular sample, and we can see it has the proper name. We can see down here we're saying sending file, and it's going to take a little while to send that file. But the main point is that it's only sending that one file, even though I have all these other different things in here. So if you want to send multiple files at once, we have to make sure that you select all those things before you hit send. So you can see how long this one file is taking. Sending all of these is going to take quite a while. So I'm going to hit send after this one is done. And once this whole process is completed and I've had some coffee and ran around the block, I'll come back and then we'll start a new project and utilize our samples and use those with our synth engines to create something very new and unique. So see you soon.